Having surpassed 1,000 completed anime, it's time to review my old favorites and find out what holds up. I'm Sacrabolic, your envoy of hope, and this is Anime Favorite Search. Hanamonogatari Suruga Devil Arc is about Kanbaru after the graduation of Araragi and Senjogahara, and she hears rumors about a devil that is guaranteed to be able to solve your problems. She worries, of course, that this is her, and as it turns out, it's not, but it is in fact a ghost from her past who has a habit of collecting people's miseries, which basically just means like stories about why they're miserable, as well as seems to be actively seeking out the devil's parts, such as Kanbaru's own monkey paw. Based on where this exists in the broadcast release order, this is really here to demonstrate and set up the later themes that would be paid off further in Awari and Zoku, the sort of coming-of-age story that is Monogatari. This is where the coming-of-age themes really come in as far as that order goes. Although, in a chronological order, this really functions more as a capstone to what you've already seen. It also addresses Kanbaru's sort of like complicated relationship with her mom and other various characters, and is really a story about her learning to take a step forward, her own personal coming-of-age story, as she is sort of starting to mature into her own woman, and in a way, learn to sort of like make some mistakes in life and, be a little bit less cautious and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's really a story about like developing Kanbaru. This also has some interactions with Araragi, which are, I think, probably the best parts of the entire arc, where it almost feels like this could be the setup for a Kanbaru passing of the torch moment, especially because we see in this that Kanbaru interacts with Ogi, who, of course, is wearing a boy's uniform. Well, anyway, we'll get back to that in a second. But so this could almost set up a sort of torch-passing moment from Araragi to Kanbaru, where Kanbaru becomes the sort of supernatural detective in the town. I don't think that's where the story goes from here, but I could easily see it going in that direction. I think there's an opening for it to go in that direction. But as far as Ogi wearing the boy's uniform, I will say that Hanamonogatari came out, I believe, at the finale. I believe it is the last part of second season. And I believe Zoku Owari Monogatari, which explains the boy's uniform, doesn't come out until the end of final season. And I think that Ogi in the boy's uniform is one of probably two examples where it does feel like Nishio Oisin did not have the full story planned out. The other example is there's some like minor inconsistencies with the Tsubasa family arc based on what was like described. Like Neko Monogatari is a little bit inconsistent with what was said in Bakemonogatari. It's very small inconsistencies, and I strongly suspect that Ogi was a slightly different character when she was first conceived and when she appeared in Hanamonogatari than what she ended up being at the end. And I think the explanation for the boy's uniform given in Zoku Owari Monogatari is, I guess you couldn't call it necessarily a retcon, but it's like a retcon. Like, I think he changed his mind on the boy's uniform thing, and he needed to fill in that gap of the story to explain it. But regardless, that's just my own suspicion. But I will say that the rest of Monogatari is so tight that the minor inconsistencies and implications that don't really match up with expectations in that you get with, Bake to Neko and from like Zoku to Hana, the fact that like those stand out as even slight inconsistencies where you don't get them in the rest of the story makes me feel like there was probably some like authorial retconning that went on during this. Not that I actually mind, but it is just sort of like the vibe I get. I could also be wrong, and it might have always been the reason for the boy's uniform. Maybe it is consistent, but it doesn't feel like it. But anyway, yeah, so this feels like a nice little capstone. I do remember it being better. I remember really enjoying the arc the first several times I've watched it, but I will say it really is just sort of like set up like interquill where we have a heart-to-heart with Araragi and then punchline. So it although I think it does have a good ending, I think it's very solid, and I think it really does put a nice capstone on the coming-of-age elements of the rest of the series. And it also feels like we have Kanbaru's story. It doesn't feel fully told to this, especially because this is sort of the process of Kanbaru coming into her own, but it doesn't feel like she's had her own graduation point. So this ends up feeling a lot of second season, where it feels like this could be an ending for the character, but it's not necessarily the most satisfying one you would have wanted. And it seems like there's still more stories to tell with the character of Kanbaru. And I do hope that we end up getting them later. I'm less familiar with what happens after Hana, so I guess I will find out as I head into the very final latest season of Monogatari, although they've already announced another season. So I'll deal with that when it comes up, I guess. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic, your envoy of hope. Bye-bye.